course, we celebrate on the Shabbat with Dahlia, and we delight in this moment, but truly we know that it has not been a week worthy of celebration for our city and for our country. And at the same time as we celebrate, our hearts are also very heavy. Of course, we hold in our hearts and prayers families in Indianapolis who have once again been plagued by gun violence that seems to be unstoppable in our country. But for a moment, I want to turn our attention a little closer to home to events here in Minnesota and Brooklyn Center this past week. I spoke to a woman this past week whose daughter likes to go bike riding around her neighborhood. On Monday, she told her daughter, be sure to be back by 6:45 because there was an evening curfew around the city at 7 o'clock. Well, that led to a discussion with her daughter about the killing of Daunte Wright. And it also led to a realization. This mom knew that if her daughter stayed out past 7 and a police officer stopped her, she would most likely simply be told to skedaddle, get home. But she doesn't worry so much about such an interaction because her daughter is white. I spoke to another woman who is Black this past week and who said that she is worried every time her child is out and about. She said that she, quote, tiptoes through life. She's always suspicious, always worried that the next time it could be me or my child. She said, I just want to be seen first and foremost as a human, not as a threat. She lives life with fear, with anger, with trauma. Two women from the same cities who live in alternative realities. Two moms whose paths in life intersect, but who walk in very different worlds, if for no other reason than the color of their skin. In a moment, we'll recite the prayer for healing, for physical healing and emotional healing. Haverim, our city and our nation are quite sick. It's a disease that has metastasized over time, a disease affecting Black and brown people first and foremost. Of course, before it can be treated, it has to be identified, diagnosed. Too often, many of us, myself included, fail to even see the disease. I heard a story this past week of two women who were Zooming with each other. One woman, who was white, was in her car driving on her way, and she was paying attention to the conversation as well as to the road. The other woman, who was Black, she was sitting at her desk, but she could hardly pay attention to the conversation. All she could focus on was the air freshener dangling from the white woman's rear view mirror. Before we can heal, first we have to diagnose. We have to see, to notice, to pay attention and understand the problem. This is exactly what we learn about in this morning's Parsha. We read about someone who comes to a Kohen with a rash that makes his skin turn white. The Kohen is supposed to look at the skin and see how deep that whiteness goes. But listen to the verse. V'ra'ah ha-kohen et ha-nega, v'ra'ahu ha-kohen. Now, if you listen closely, you heard that word ra'ah, to see, it's repeated twice. Why? The rabbis teach the Kohen is supposed to examine the rash, that is the sickness itself. That's the first ra'ah. He must also look at the person, the whole person. That's the second ra'ah. He must see the bigger picture. Only then can the Kohen give a complete, accurate diagnosis. In other words, if we're just seeing a person with expired tabs pulled over, if we're just seeing a person with a warrant, if we're just seeing a tragic accident with a gun instead of a taser, then we're not seeing the whole picture. We're not seeing what it means to be a Black person in this country. We're not seeing how policing works in this state. I'm reminded of a story that's told of Rabbi Yitzhak of Berdichev, Levi Yitzhak of Berdichev. He was once at a tavern, and as he sat there, he listened in on a conversation of a couple who were the end of the bar, and they were expressing their love for each other. One turned to the other and said, tell me what hurts me. The other was shocked and said, how should I know what hurts you? And she responded, if you really loved me, you'd know what hurts me. Chavirim, we are commanded by Ahavta L'recha Kamocha to love our neighbors. To do so, we have to see them, to really see them. We have to recognize our own blind spots and our biases. Absent that, we will not properly diagnose the disease. We will not be able to treat it, and I fear it will only spread. I invite and encourage you to get involved with Bethel Synagogue's social justice group that seeks to do our part to dismantle systemic racism and to be in touch with co-chairs from that committee, Donnie and Alex Fisher. Now, as we turn to the prayer for healing, I invite you to hold in your heart the family of Daunte Wright, of George Floyd, and of so many others who are hurting, all of who are suffering trauma, including Jews of color in our community. Hold them in your heart, not simply because now they and we mourn, but because they matter, because Black lives matter. Please join with Cantor Abrams in this prayer for healing.
Avotenu mikor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misheberach imotenu mikor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Amen, amen. We'll invite Bill